Hello, my name's Lorelei. After my surgery, I couldn't walk. I couldn't eat without help. I laid there, bruised, bandaged, in the house I paid for, while my dad said, "We're not your damn servants." They left me in the same bloody pants for days. My mother hid my meds. And now, they live in a rented duplex, doing delivery gigs they once looked down on. But what hurts more, being abandoned while I was bedridden, or learning it wasn't just neglect. It was calculated. What kind of family builds their comfort on your silence and expects you to thank them for it? I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fracture in my pelvis or the one between me and them. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and old vinyl. My back stuck to the sheets, damp with sweat, while the ceiling above me pulsed with the rhythm of machines I barely understood. For a moment, I thought I was alone. Then Jared's face came into focus, lined, concerned, and completely out of place in a medical setting. "They said they couldn't get a ride," he muttered, before I could even ask. I blinked at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. He adjusted the blanket around my legs like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "You're gonna be okay," he added, voice quieter now, as if trying not to alert a sleeping child in the next bed. I tried not to let the weight of that sentence flatten me. I was 33 years old, recovering from surgery after being pinned under a collapsing steel frame at an expo my team had worked 6 months to prepare. My pelvis was shattered in 3 places. Ribs cracked. I could barely sit up, and my parents, who lived less than 20 minutes away, couldn't be bothered to show. Back then, I told myself maybe they were scared. Maybe the hospital setting, the sight of me bandaged and bruised, triggered something in them they couldn't handle. But deep down, even then, I knew better. What scared them wasn't my pain. It was the possibility I might need something. And 2 days later, I was back in my childhood home. Well, technically, I was in my old room, but nothing about it felt like mine anymore. The posters had been taken down, replaced with faded floral wallpaper. My mattress sagged, the corners curled like it had been waiting for someone to finally throw it out. The air carried that faint scent of must and forgotten. Jared wheeled me inside, careful not to bump the doorframe. My parents were nowhere to be seen. "You sure they knew you were coming home today?" he asked. I nodded, though the confidence in that gesture was forced. Mom texted. Said the key would be under the plant pot. She didn't want to be here? She said she had a hair appointment. He didn't say anything else. Just helped me out of the chair and onto the bed. Every movement stung, like a reminder that I was no longer in control of even my own body. Later that evening, I tried to sit up on my own. Pain radiated from my hips, down my legs, into my spine. I gritted my teeth and reached for the small plastic bottle of pain meds the hospital had sent with me. The label had my name on it in black print, clear as day. "Don't take those without food," my mother's voice cut in. I hadn't even heard her come in. "I'm in pain," I said. She crossed the room, took the bottle from my hand, and placed it on the top shelf of the bookcase, out of reach. "You don't want to become one of those people. You know, addicted. You've always been strong, Lorelei. You'll get through this." I wanted to scream, but what would it change? That night, the pain clawed at my insides. I tried to muffle my sobs with a pillow, not wanting to wake anyone, though I doubted they'd come even if I screamed. By morning, my clothes were still the same, sweat-soaked, blood-crusted from the night of the accident. I called out, weakly at first, then louder. "Mom?" Nothing. "Dad?" Eventually, the TV in the living room clicked off. My father appeared at the doorway, remote in hand. "What is it now?" he asked, like I was disturbing a game he'd been invested in. "Could you help me get some fresh clothes? Maybe just toss these in the laundry?" He didn't move, didn't even look directly at me. "We're not your damn servants," he muttered, before turning and heading back to the couch. The door didn't close behind him, but the sound was louder than a slam. I lay there, every inch of me screaming, and not just from the pain, from the knowing, the bitter, burning truth that no one was coming. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Jared again. He checked in every few hours. I told him I was fine. A lie. but one I could swallow more easily than the reality. As the sun dipped behind the bare trees outside, casting shadows across my room, I let my eyes drift toward the ceiling once again. If I mattered less than a channel click, then maybe I never mattered at all. It wasn't just my pelvis that had cracked. They didn't forget me. They just chose not to remember. The thought curled around my ribs tighter than the brace the hospital strapped me into. Lying there, in a bed that sagged in the middle like it hadn't held a body in years, I stared at the same faded ceiling tiles I'd grown up under. Except now, every crack looked deliberate. Like they'd let the rot fester, hoping no one would look too closely. 3 days had passed since I'd come home. 3 long, silent days. I hadn't changed clothes once. The hospital scrubs were stiff with dried blood and sweat, and every movement reminded me of how broken I was. I couldn't reach the closet, too far. Couldn't stand unaided, too risky. I'd buzzed for my mom once, then twice. Nothing. "It's just laundry," I whispered to myself. But we both knew it wasn't. It was acknowledgement. Care. The bare minimum. That afternoon, after the sun had dipped behind the birch trees in the yard, I heard footsteps. My dad. I called out, carefully, my voice raspy from disuse. "Dad, can you help me with just some clean clothes?" He paused at the door. Didn't step in, just stood there, hand on the frame, remote control still clutched like a shield. "You could have thrown them in last night," he muttered, as if I hadn't been half sedated and horizontal for 72 hours. The laundry room was downstairs. I couldn't even make it across the hall. Before I could respond, he was gone again. The familiar sound of the TV returned, louder now, like white noise to drown me out. By morning, I was starving, not just emotionally, it was physical. The pain meds needed food. I'd been instructed that clearly. Take them on an empty stomach and risk nausea, or worse. I scribbled a note on a sticky pad and stuck it to the fridge the night before. "Please leave something for breakfast. Yogurt. Anything soft." The house was quiet when I woke. My stomach growled beneath the bandages, sharp and insistent. I shuffled toward the door, biting back every wince, then braced my palms against the hallway walls. Each step was a small act of defiance. When I reached the kitchen, I pulled open the fridge. There was wine, 3 bottles, a half-eaten steak, foil-covered dishes, something Verena must have made for guests, but nothing for me, no yogurt, no fruit. No juice, not even a slice of bread. The air in the room chilled me more than the cold tile floor. I opened the cabinet, spotted a protein shake, far back, behind the pasta. I stretched, hand trembling, almost there. And then the world tipped. The bottle slipped from my grasp and rolled out of reach. My vision darkened at the edges. My knees buckled, and before I could brace myself, I was on the floor, face to tile. The silence that followed was terrifying. I wasn't sure how long I lay there, maybe minutes, maybe longer. It was the sharp scent of antiseptic wipes that brought me back. Jared's voice broke through the fog, sharp and scared. "Lorelei! Jesus, what happened?" He crouched beside me, gently turning my body. My face throbbed. My hips screamed. The side of my lip felt raw, likely busted on the tile. "They went out," I murmured. "I think they forgot I was here." He didn't respond. Just moved like a machine, checking me over, lifting me slowly, guiding me back to the recliner. He found a clean towel in the cabinet, one I hadn't seen used in months, and placed it under my legs. He looked around the kitchen, jaw clenched. "No one left you food? Nothing?" "They had a dinner party, I think." He didn't curse, didn't yell. He just nodded, jaw tightening further, and started cleaning up the shattered glass and the spilled protein shake. The silence between us said more than words could. Later that evening, I sat propped up in the recliner, a glass of water in my lap, a single banana on the end table. It wasn't much, but it was something. Jared had gone, after ensuring I had food, meds, and my phone within arm's reach. The front door had barely closed when Verena walked in from the garage. Her heels clicked like accusations across the wood floor. "I heard Jared was here," she said, placing her purse on the counter. I passed out on the kitchen floor, I told her calmly. Her eyes flicked to the bruise on my lip, then back to her phone. Well, you should have set a reminder to eat. I stared. I left a note, on the fridge. She didn't even look up. You know we've been so busy lately, and honestly, this melodrama is getting out of hand. No apology, no concern, just the familiar dismissal she'd perfected over the years. You're acting dramatic again, Lorelei. I wanted to scream, to remind her I had almost cracked my skull on the tile, but I didn't. Because somewhere in my gut, I knew that wouldn't change anything. It wasn't blood sugar that knocked me out, it was being invisible. That night, long after the house went quiet and the wine glasses clinked into the dishwasher, I sat with a flashlight and my journal. I didn't write much, just one line. Maybe they weren't changing. Maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time. If silence is my crime, it's time I become noisy. I didn't say that out loud, of course. Not yet. But it was there, in the back of my throat, pulsing with every breath. A thought that was slowly finding legs. Jared came by that morning, as he often did, no knocking, just the quiet rustle of grocery bags and a familiar voice asking if I was awake. He didn't wait for an answer. He never did. That was the thing about Jared. He knew when I didn't have the strength to reply, and he didn't need the performance to justify his presence. I heard him setting things on the kitchen counter, a gallon of milk, some instant oatmeal, my favorite unsweetened yogurt, the kind no one else in this house ever touched. Fridge was nearly empty, he called toward the hallway. You holding up? Barely, I said, my voice still raw from last night. Your mom's car wasn't here when I pulled in, he added, stepping into the room. Left you this. He handed me a stack of mail, pausing when he reached the last envelope. Weird. This one has your name. Full legal name, too. I took it, puzzled. Mortgage statement. My name, not theirs. I furrowed my brow. This has to be wrong. I never signed a mortgage. I've never even applied for one. Maybe your name's on it as a co-signer? Jared offered, carefully neutral. No, I said, the word coming too fast, too sharp. Nobody told me anything. He didn't push, just sat beside me while I peeled open the envelope with fingers that trembled far more than they should have. As I read the statement, a cold, familiar feeling settled in my gut. Principal balance, escrow, interest rate, payment history, all of it under my name. Later that afternoon, with Jared's help, I made my way, slowly, painfully, toward the small cabinet where I kept old paperwork. It took nearly an hour to sort through the clutter of hospital bills, insurance forms, tax files, and there it was, a copy of the deed. Title: Lorelei Marin. Date: 8 years ago. I sat back in stunned silence. My grandmother had passed 10 months before that. I remembered the family meeting in the living room. Verena had said I wasn't emotionally stable enough to deal with inheritance. Let us take care of it, she'd said, tucking a loose curl behind her ear like she was offering a kindness, not a con. They told me it was too much responsibility, that they'd handle the logistics. I believed them. The document said otherwise. Jesus, Lorelei, Jared muttered, his eyes scanning the deed. They used your name to secure the loan. They used my name, I repeated, almost to myself, and never told me. They live here rent-free, you pay the taxes, and they act like they're doing you a favor? My stomach turned. This wasn't just manipulation, it was theft. A quiet, paper-thin theft. No keys taken, no windows shattered, just names shifted, boxes checked, and trust dismantled. By sunset, my mind was racing. I didn't know what to do yet, but I knew I couldn't sit still anymore. That night, the doorbell rang. A delivery woman stood holding a brown package. Medical supplies for Verena Blythe, she said. I blinked. Are you sure? This address is correct, but there's no Verena Blythe in need of supplies here. It's for a blood sugar monitor. Standing order. We deliver every 2 weeks. I think there's a mistake, I said, signing anyway. I opened the box once she left. Inside was a device with my prescription label, scratched off and replaced with my mother's name. I took a photo. At dinner, I brought it up. Mom, the device came under your name. She didn't flinch. They don't deliver under yours anymore. Something about system errors. System errors don't change legal prescriptions. They said it was easier this way, less hassle. I bit back the reply I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked at her and said, "It's not easier. It's erasing me." Verena set down her fork with a sigh. "Not everything's about you, Lorelei." "No," I said softly. "Just the parts that involve lying." The next morning, I was still thinking about it when I reached into a drawer and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. I hadn't touched it in years. Dust flaked off the spine. I began writing. Names, dates, payments I'd made, medication pickups. The time I gave Isolde my car when hers broke down. The night I drove my mother to the ER when her blood pressure spiked and waited in the parking lot for 6 hours, the dinner 5 years ago. We had a barbecue in the backyard. I'd bought the steaks, picked up the beer, even paid the neighbor kid to mow the lawn. That night, Verena gave a toast. "To Isolde," she said, raising a glass, "for hosting this beautiful evening." Isolde smiled, thanked everyone. My name never came up. That night, I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't doing it for praise. But it had mattered. Of course it had. You can only be invisible for so long before it begins to suffocate you. I wrote that down too. If they can write me out, I can write them down. I didn't know what I was building, not yet, but it felt like armor. The final entry that night was short. "They act like I'm lucky they let me stay here, but it's not their house. It never was." I closed the book, slid it beneath my pillow. The next day, I woke up to the smell of burnt toast and Verena arguing with a customer on the phone. Another delivery came. This time, groceries addressed to the Blythe family. My name wasn't anywhere. I didn't ask about it. Instead, I opened my laptop, accessed the mortgage company portal with the credentials Jared helped me reset, and requested all records tied to my social security number. 3 hours later, I had every document they'd signed. I printed them. They thought I wouldn't look. They thought silence was consent. But I wasn't quiet anymore. Next time they crop me out, I won't be standing at the edge. I'll be holding the camera. That thought stayed with me through the next few mornings, lingering in the quiet moments between waking and remembering. I didn't know what shape my retaliation would take, only that it would come. And when it did, I'd be ready. No longer sidelined, no longer edited out of my own life. 3 days after that thought solidified in my chest like cement, Jared arrived around noon, his arms full of groceries and a small gift bag. He never explained the bag, and I didn't ask. He placed it gently on my nightstand before unloading the fridge and prepping a meal I could actually eat. That was Jared, wordless care wrapped in simple gestures. He was halfway through slicing a pear when he said it. "There's a party this weekend, retirement thing, for your dad. Isolde mentioned it." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "What party?" "Retirement," he repeated, not looking up. "Apparently the whole family's coming. Verena's organizing it. Catered. Slideshow and everything." It wasn't shock that settled in me. It was confirmation. Later that evening, I waited until Verena was in the kitchen microwaving leftovers. "Mom," I said, keeping my tone even, "am I invited to Dad's party?" She barely turned. "You can come if you want, but don't overdo it. These events can be exhausting." "For who? Me or you?" She didn't answer, just shook the sauce packet and dumped it over the rice. The sound of her stirring drowned out anything else I might have said. The next morning, I asked her if she could take me to physical therapy before the event. It wasn't much of a request, just a detour on the way to the venue. I'd scheduled the appointment weeks ago, part of the structured rehab plan the doctor had insisted on. Verena sipped her coffee and didn't look up from her phone. "That place is on the other side of town. Gas isn't cheap." "You're already going out." "I'm already doing a lot," she snapped. "You think I'm sitting around eating bonbons all day?" "No," I said quietly. "I think you're sitting around pretending I'm not here." That shut her up, but the answer was still no. Appointment canceled. On the day of the party, Jared came early. He helped me dress, carefully easing my legs into a pair of stretch slacks and a cardigan that used to fit better before the pain meds puffed me up. "You don't have to go," he said gently. adjusting the collar. I do, I replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror. But not for them. The event was held at a rented hall 10 minutes away. When we arrived, the parking lot was nearly full. Jared helped me into a wheelchair and pushed me toward the entrance. Inside, laughter bounced off the walls. Tables lined with centerpieces of miniature trucks and work boots, Harlan's favorite career memorabilia. Verena was at the door, greeting guests with her usual faux charm. She turned when she saw me. "Oh, you made it." Not, "I'm glad you're here," just that. "Where should I sit?" I asked. She gestured toward the back, near the coat rack. "It's less crowded over there." Jared didn't say a word. He just wheeled me to the assigned corner. People passed by, said things like, "Wow, look at you," and "So good to see you out of the house," as though I'd returned from some soul-searching sabbatical instead of fighting to stand upright without crying. Then the slideshow began. The lights dimmed. A soft piano track started. And up came photo after photo, Harlan holding Isolde as a baby, Isolde graduating, Isolde on vacation, Isolde at family dinners. Me? I was in one picture, in the corner, half-cropped, my face turned, no mention of my name, no reference to the daughter who bought the house we were all living in. The final slide said, "Thank you to everyone who made this journey possible." Everyone but me. When the lights came back on, I kept my face neutral. Isolde came over, hugged me lightly in front of a group of distant cousins. "You've always liked being in the background," she said with a smile. Jared leaned in. "You okay?" I nodded, but the heat in my chest told another story. Later, when we got home, I asked Verena if she'd mind rescheduling the physical therapy I missed. She sighed dramatically, as though I'd asked her to rebuild the Hoover Dam. "We just had a beautiful night," she said, setting down her purse. Why ruin it with complaints? Missing rehab isn't a complaint. You don't even try to appreciate what we do. "What you do?" I repeated, incredulous. Harlan shuffled in, loosening his tie. "Lorelai," he muttered, "you've always been the sensitive one. Everything's a slight with you." "It's not about sensitivity," I said, my voice steady. "It's about being treated like I exist." "That's rich," Verena added, "coming from someone who lets her friend run errands while we do everything else." "Everything else?" I asked. "Like what? Forgetting to feed me? Canceling my rehab? Cutting me out of Dad's party?" Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, I sat alone in my room, the party brochure still in my lap. I stared at the photo on the back. Harlan, Verena, Isolde, even Isolde's husband, all smiling, unified, like a complete family. I wasn't in it. If I could disappear that easily in a slideshow, I thought, then maybe I already had. But I wouldn't let it happen again. If they cross the line this time, they won't find me on the other side. They'll find consequences. The quiet resolve in my chest was no longer a whisper, it was scaffolding. I could feel it bracing the parts of me that had once collapsed under their weight. My silence wasn't meekness anymore, it was intention. The morning after the retirement party, the house smelled like reheated ham and too much perfume. The fake kind Verena always wore when she wanted to project wealth, though it smelled more like aerosol regret. I was folding the small pile of clean clothes Jared had washed and returned when I heard the knock. 3 short raps, too quick to be polite. Before I could respond, Verena pushed the door open, balancing folded sheets in one arm and the air of someone making an announcement, not asking a favor. "You'll need to move downstairs," she said, without even glancing up. "Isolde's boyfriend is staying the weekend. He needs the room." I stared at her, unmoving. She stepped further in, started stripping the bed like it belonged to her. "Don't make this difficult, Lorelai. It's just for 2 nights. Maybe 3. This is my room." Verena finally looked at me, eyes dry as salt. "This is my house." "No," I said, slowly, evenly. "It's mine." She rolled her eyes. "Legalities aside, I've managed this home for 30 years. You've been back for what, 3 weeks? And you've barely lifted a finger." "I've had surgery, Mom. I can't walk." "Then you won't have to go far," she replied, fluffing the pillow like she was settling a guest in, not evicting a daughter. "The basement's quiet. Quiet. That was the word she chose. Jared showed up 30 minutes later after my text. He didn't speak as he helped me gather my things, my water jug, my pain meds, the blanket that didn't smell like lemon-scented cleaner. The stairs to the basement creaked like they hadn't been walked in years. Cold air kissed my ankles as we descended. Jared flicked on the overhead light, revealing a space more storage than sanctuary. Cardboard boxes, a plastic folding table, an old twin mattress leaning against the far wall. I stood in the center of it all, wobbling slightly with the crutch under my left arm. "You okay?" Jared asked. "I've been worse." He set the mattress down. We made the bed in silence. From the top of the stairs, Verena's voice floated down. "If you need anything, just shout." "I won't," I replied, too quietly for her to hear. That was the point. That evening, after Jared had left and the shadows stretched across the concrete, I found an old Sharpie in a drawer of craft supplies. I took it to the wall near the base of the stairs, drew a single black line from one edge to the other. Above it, I wrote, "Lorelei's last line." It was childish, maybe petty, but it was mine, a declaration, a boundary drawn not in sand, but on cement. Later that night, muffled voices floated down through the floorboards. I wasn't meant to hear them, but they weren't exactly whispering either. "She's acting like a martyr," Isolde's voice said. "Maybe she wants people to feel sorry for her." "She should be grateful she has somewhere to go," Verena added. "We didn't have to take her in." Then Harlan, quieter but still clear. "You know I left my job because of her. All those appointments, driving her around. I had no choice." I sat there, pulse steady but hard. They weren't arguing, they were agreeing, bonding over their shared narrative, one where I was the burden, the excuse, the punchline. I pulled out my phone, sent a message to Jared. "They're feeding off the idea of me. I'm just the ghost they get to blame for their disappointments." He didn't reply immediately, but when he did, it was short and to the point. "Then it's time they starved." The next morning, I wrote a letter. Not addressed to anyone. Just a note I taped to the wall above my bed, just beneath the line I'd drawn. "I will not be moved again, not by guilt, not by fear. Not by them." It wasn't prose, it wasn't poetry, it was policy. For the rest of the week, I barely spoke to them. Meals were delivered late or forgotten entirely. I kept a granola stash in a desk drawer, rationing like a soldier waiting out a siege. On Thursday, I heard Verena yelling at the utility company over the phone, something about unexpected charges and autopay settings. I smiled, not because it pleased me, but because I knew exactly where the bills were being routed, through the checking account I opened for them years ago, which they never removed me from. By Friday, I stopped flinching when I heard footsteps overhead. Their words couldn't bruise me anymore. Their stories didn't own me. I had the deed. I had the receipts. And now, finally, I had the line. The last space they'll ever take from me is this basement. Let them try to sell what doesn't belong to them. Let them try to twist the facts, to cash in on silence, to hide behind legalese and performative concern. I'll be waiting, with paperwork. The next morning, snow began to fall. Not in a storm, not dramatic, but slow and persistent, like the world was trying to hush everything it couldn't fix. A whisper of white settled along the edge of the basement window, pressing against the years of grime that had accumulated on the outside pane. I watched it gather, layer by quiet layer, as the cold crept into my bones. The front door opened above me. I could hear it through the air vent near the ceiling. Jared's voice followed, muffled by distance but unmistakably calm and firm. "Lorelei needs her medication," he said. A pause, then Harlan's voice replied, clipped and dismissive. "She needs to stop relying on people who don't live here. She's family. She should depend on us." "Funny," Jared said evenly. "She's trying." Silence followed, final and cold. 5 minutes later, a paper bag slipped through the basement window. Inside were my medications and a neatly folded heated blanket. The gesture wasn't generous, it was damage control. My hands trembled as I picked it up, but it wasn't the cold that shook me, it was rage, not wild, loud, out-of-control rage. No, this was clean, quiet, surgical. That night, I waited until I was sure the house was empty before venturing upstairs. I needed to use the bathroom. The kitchen was dark, but sound carried well in this house. Verena was on the phone in the living room, door ajar. She hadn't bothered to close it all the way. "If we list it before year end," she said, her voice casual, calculating, "we can move it fast. Lorelei won't need to be involved. She's not working. She's basically immobile." Then laughter. "She doesn't even know what's in her name." I stood still. My breath caught, but I didn't make a sound. My chest thundered, but I didn't move. Until I did. One step at a time, I backed down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, until I reached the basement floor again. The cement felt more like home than anything upstairs ever had. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I powered on my phone and pulled up a legal blog I'd bookmarked months ago when I first started getting suspicious. My gut had been right. Washington State Property Rights. Eviction Protocols. Power of Attorney Abuse. I read every article twice, some 3 times. When my eyes blurred from staring at the screen, I turned to the old family laptop. Jared had helped me unlock it weeks earlier. The password had been laughably easy, Verena's birthday. The hard drive hadn't been wiped, not even close. Scanned forms from the year I purchased the house. Bank statements, tax forms, old photos. They'd been lazy, entitled. Sure I'd never look. Sure I'd never fight. They were wrong. The next day, Jared came by again. I asked him to install 2 cameras, one trained on the hallway outside the basement door, the other angled at the front porch. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and got to work. As he adjusted the mount near the doorframe, I pulled out my phone. "I ordered something else," I said. "A voice recorder. Small. Wireless. Should arrive Friday." He glanced over his shoulder. "Where are you putting it?" "Behind the air vent," I said. "That's where their conversations leak through." He nodded. "Good." Later, while he tightened the last screw, he asked, "Why not just confront them?" I didn't hesitate. "Because I'm not fighting fire with fire," I told him. "I'm gathering kindling. When I light it, it won't be a spark. It'll be a goddamn torch." He smiled at that. "Then let's make sure it burns hot." That night, I sat at the small desk Jared had helped me build. I printed everything. The deed, in my name, bank transfers, from my account, always mine, screenshots of text messages. Every time they said they'd pay me back. They never did. Time-stamped emails confirming utilities, repairs, maintenance, my money, my responsibility, line after line, receipt after receipt. I hadn't realized how much I'd given until I saw it all in front of me. There were gas cards I'd loaded for Harlan, Venmo payments to Isolde for emergencies, Amazon orders Verena begged me to place when her back was out, and she couldn't even sit to work. All logged, all documented. No more verbal agreements, no more memory games. I stared at the pile. This wasn't spite. It was a paper trail. And I was done being the detour in my own life. The following morning, the house phone rang. They hadn't disconnected it, probably because it was still linked to Verena's real estate contacts. "Is Verena available?" a polished voice asked. "This is Lorelei Marin," I said smoothly. "I'm the property owner, and I will not be selling." A pause. Then, uncertain. "I'm sorry. I was told—" "I am," I said. "I own this home. Not Verena, not Harlan, me." And I hung up. Later that day, Verena stood in the kitchen, blinking at the empty pantry. "Where's the peanut butter?" she asked. "We're out," I said. She didn't look at me. She didn't say thank you or ask why I was there. She just brushed past, opened the cabinet, and made a face when she found it empty. That night, I heard them again. "She's acting strange," Verena said into her phone. "Colder, suspicious." Harlan chimed in. "She's probably hormonal." "You know how she gets." Then Isolde. "Maybe she's just realizing how much she depends on us." I walked back downstairs and sat at my desk. I opened the audio file from the recorder and turned the volume up. Let them keep talking. Let them whisper and plot and pretend. I was done asking for clarity. I had it. I spoke aloud, only to myself, but loud enough that it filled the basement. They think I'm broken. I looked at the stack of folders beside me. The proof, the facts, the truth. But I'm not. I opened a new file labeled Legal Prep, Phase 1. I'm just careful. A small smile curled at the edge of my mouth. And careful, I whispered, can be lethal. Let them say I'm the villain. In court, I get to speak uninterrupted. That morning started like any other. The hum of the furnace upstairs, the clink of Verena's mug on the countertop, the muted laugh of a game show host drifting down through the vents. Outside, the frost painted delicate veins on the window pane beside my mattress. I stared at it for a long while, letting the silence breathe before facing the day. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dana, my cousin in Oregon. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she was always decent, empathetic, a soft voice in a loud family. She had sent a screenshot, a conversation thread from the family group chat I hadn't been a part of since I was cut from the Christmas mailing list 2 years back. At the top was a message from Isolda. She's leeching off mom and dad. She doesn't even help pay bills anymore. Acts like she's owed everything. Another message followed almost immediately. Parasites don't get gratitude. My stomach didn't drop. That part of me had stopped working weeks ago, but something else did shift. A calm, cold click like a gear locking into place. I scrolled through Dana's message, which included more of the thread. They'd been saying things about me for months, painting me as dead weight, a problem, a liability. I replied only once. Thanks for sending this. Don't respond in the group. Let them keep talking. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Verena didn't answer it, and I knew why. I made my way up the stairs slowly, gripping the railing with more strength than usual. My legs still ached, but adrenaline had a way of numbing the edges. At the door stood a man in a windbreaker, clipboard in hand. Lorelei Marin? Yes. He handed me an envelope, nodded, and walked off. Inside, legal documents, filed in Spokane County Court. Failure to provide elder care. Financial neglect. Emotional cruelty. Filed by Verena and Harlan Blythe. I read the pages 3 times, each word carving something sharp and irrevocable into me. They claimed I was a legal tenant, not the homeowner. That I had stopped providing food. That I refused care. That I had emotionally endangered them by withdrawing from family obligations. My hands didn't shake. I didn't throw the papers. I simply walked back downstairs, sat at my desk, and pulled out the folder I'd been preparing. It was time. I called Jared. He answered on the second ring. They did it, I said. I'm on my way. He arrived less than 20 minutes later with 2 coffees and his laptop. We sat side by side, reviewing everything. The deed, the bank transfers, the screenshots of every time I paid for groceries, utilities, property taxes, the voice recordings I had from the vent. Harlan saying, I left my job because of her. Verena telling someone she doesn't know what's in her name. The photos of me bruised, recovering, the hospital discharge records, the receipts from therapy they never drove me to. They wanted to erase me, I told Jared. I'll make sure every lie they've told is documented. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with an attorney I found through a domestic legal aid clinic. Her name was Sheila Connors, sharp suit, blunt words, zero fluff. She read through the documents in silence. Then she said, They sued you? Good. Now we countersue. Within 48 hours, she filed motions for defamation, misappropriation of funds, and fraudulent occupancy. Sheila was calm, but her fire was exact. We'll file discovery and request access to all household financial records. If they've touched your inheritance, we'll find it. Meanwhile, Isolda was busy posting. A vague status went up on her Facebook. Sometimes the sickest people pretend to be the victims. Watch who you defend. No names, no direct call-outs. But it didn't matter. Everyone knew that was her style. Backhanded, strategic, just enough to plant the seed. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Sheila. "This is good," she wrote back. "Shows intent." Jared and I sat at the kitchen table that night. The lights were dim, the heater clunking away in the background. "Do you still want peace?" he asked me quietly. I stared at him for a moment, then said, "No, I want facts, and I want them served." The next morning, I signed the paperwork. Filing countersuit wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about money. It was about narrative. They had controlled the story for too long, defined me in whispers, painted me with selfishness, made me small in rooms I'd paid to be in. Now I had documentation, legal backing, a voice no longer muted by shame. I was the villain in their version of events, the bitter daughter, the ungrateful dependent, the complication. Let them say it. In court, I get to speak uninterrupted. I didn't need the verdict to win. I just needed to speak without being interrupted. That morning, the courthouse was still slick with last night's sleet. The clouds overhead hung low and dull, casting a gray sheen over everything. Jared parked the car in a handicapped spot near the entrance, then came around to help me out. I insisted on walking in, slow but steady, every step deliberate. I didn't want to be pushed, not today. Inside, the waiting area was quiet, the soft shuffle of feet, the occasional cough. Nothing like TV, no drama yet, no gavel pounding. Just a hallway with tired benches and older carpet that smelled faintly of coffee and rain. They arrived 5 minutes after us, Verena in a muted gray pantsuit that probably hadn't seen daylight since a funeral. Harlan in his only dress coat, the one with mismatched buttons. Isolde trailed behind them, sunglasses still on, like she was shielding herself from shame, or maybe hoping to still be seen as the victim. Sheila met us in the side room. Calm, sharp, no small talk. "They'll posture," she said flatly, smoothing out the front of her blazer. "Let them. We have receipts." We were called into the courtroom. The judge, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense, motioned for everyone to be seated. Her voice had the kind of cadence that made people listen without question. Opening statements began. Their lawyer leaned into drama. Words like abandonment, instability, ungrateful. He painted a picture of a daughter who refused care to her aging parents, who manipulated finances and neglected emotional needs. When he finished, Sheila stood. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't gesture. "My client," she began, "owns the home in question, legally, fully. This is not speculation. This is a matter of record." Then she handed the judge a copy of the title deed. My name in bold. Their names absent. From that moment, the tone shifted. Sheila laid out the documents one by one. Bank transfers from my account. Each month, utilities paid. Screenshots of texts confirming groceries I'd ordered and bills I'd covered. Voice recordings, Harlan stating he hadn't worked in years, Verena admitting they took over my finances. Photos, taken by Jared, of bruises on my arms and face after I fell in the kitchen. Medical reports from the ER. A list of missed physical therapy appointments and one email where Verena declined to drive me. No one said a word. The judge didn't interrupt once. The courtroom was still as Sheila paused and opened a manila folder. Then came the voicemail, Verena's voice, sharp and irritable. "She doesn't even know the house is in her name. We'll list it before year-end. Get her out without a fuss." The judge's pen stopped mid-page. In cross-examination, Verena tried to recover. "She's twisting everything. We cared for her. She's rewriting history." Sheila didn't flinch. "No, Mrs. Blythe, she's finally recording it." Then she played a Facebook video, Isolde at a holiday brunch, clearly saying, "Lorelei won't come. She's mad about nothing as usual." Sheila turned to the judge. "If the plaintiff is mad about being portrayed unfairly, I'd remind them. This is their story, told in their own voices." The judge asked Harlan a single question. "Did you contribute to the utility bills?" He cleared his throat, avoided eye contact. "No." The silence was deafening. 20 minutes later, we were dismissed for a brief recess. I sat in the hallway, legs aching, head spinning. Jared nudged me. "She's going to rule in your favor. You can feel it." "I don't care if she does," I said, "as long as she believes me." Back in the room, the verdict was delivered calmly, without drama. The property at 428 Glenbrook is legally owned by Lorelei Marin. The plaintiffs have no legal claim to residency. She paused. The court orders the plaintiffs to vacate the premises within 14 days. There was a murmur, then stillness. The claim of defamation will proceed to civil court. Then her final words, sharp and low. Shame is not a defense against documentation. Outside, Verena sobbed for the cameras that weren't there. Harlan muttered something about betrayal. Isolde just turned away. We didn't ride back together. 2 days later, I returned home to find boxes in the foyer. Isolde and her husband were dragging suitcases toward the driveway. Verena cried again, not for me, but for the neighbors who might think less of her. I hope you're happy now, she whispered. I'm not happy, I said. But I'm not silent. Harlan stood by the front steps. You'll be alone. I looked around the house. Clean. Quiet. Finally mine. I've never been less alone, I told him. They left that afternoon. I walked from room to room after the door closed. The house echoed differently now. No constant TV. No scent of perfume or microwave dinners. Just peace. I stood in the living room, one hand on the wall I'd painted when I first moved in. That was before I handed it all over, before I believed their story over my own. It took breaking my bones to find my backbone. They lost access to me the moment I realized I had value. I didn't need the verdict to win. I just needed to speak without being interrupted. The quiet didn't feel empty that first morning. It felt earned. Sunlight stretched across the hardwood floor like it was laying itself down gently, politely, no longer trying to cut through chaos. The windows, once smudged with months of dust and condensation, now gleamed. I'd wipe them myself, slowly, stubbornly, one pane at a time. The television was off. No more war documentaries at full blast. No talk shows scolding strangers. Just a kettle singing softly on the stove and the rustle of the newspaper Jared dropped off each morning like clockwork. I carried my tea to the couch, both hands around the mug, letting the warmth settle into my bones. No noise from upstairs. No footsteps overhead. Because no one else lived here anymore. It had been 6 days since the last box left the house. Isolde's husband drove the rental truck. Verena cried, loudly, until they turned the corner. Harlan didn't say goodbye. He only paused by the rose bush I had planted with Grandma years ago, looked at it once, and kept walking. The space they left behind wasn't just physical, it was atmospheric. The house itself seemed to breathe again. Later that afternoon, I climbed into the attic for the first time in years. It had taken me that long to build the strength, first physically, then emotionally. A single pull of the cord brought the ladder down. I stepped onto it cautiously, each rung creaking under my weight, but not in protest. The air up there was dry, almost brittle. Cardboard boxes lined one wall, old suitcases piled at the back. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Maybe closure. Maybe proof I hadn't imagined it all. Instead, I found a shoebox, tucked beneath a blanket I hadn't seen since I left for college. Inside, old photos, a rosary, and a single envelope, sealed, yellowed slightly with age, on the front, in delicate script. For Lorelei, only you. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it with careful fingers. The letter was dated 3 weeks before Grandma passed. You've always been the one who stayed quiet. You didn't scream for attention like others. You just helped. You listened. You carried more than anyone ever asked, and never asked for anything in return. That's a beautiful way to be, but it's also dangerous. People will mistake your quiet for weakness. They'll rewrite you out of stories because they know you won't correct them. Don't let them. This house was always meant for you. You were the only one who made it feel like a home. I pressed the paper to my chest, inhaling as if the ink could fill my lungs. She knew. Even back then, before the lawsuits, before the betrayal, she saw me. She saw what they would try to erase and gave me the only armor she could: truth. The next few weeks passed with the slow rhythm of rebuilding. I didn't throw a party, didn't post on social media. I wasn't interested in proving anything. Instead, I started quietly reassembling PulseLink, the wellness platform I'd built from scratch before everything unraveled. This time, it would be different, smaller, more personal. A trauma-informed care system for patients recovering from illness and surgery, especially those navigating difficult home environments. Jared joined the team unofficially, managing logistics. He liked being behind the scenes, and I liked having someone whose silence didn't feel like a judgment. We rented a modest office space near downtown. I hired a small team, people who'd been overlooked before, nurses with non-traditional resumes, therapists who understood grief as more than a credential. We launched with no ads, no press, just results. Clients came quietly, through referrals. Stories trickled in, of women recovering in basements, of sons labeled ungrateful, of caretakers collapsing from burnout. We built something not around noise, but necessity. I declined every podcast invite, deleted every request to speak on panels about resilience. My wins were mine. They didn't need applause to be real. By December, snow covered the backyard. The fig tree I once thought would never survive had dropped its last leaf, now bare and strong. Christmas came. No cards from Verena or Harlan, no calls, no packages from Isolde. But one email arrived on the 23rd. Subject: Hope you're happy. Message: We're not, no greeting, no signature, just that. I stared at it for a moment, then moved it to trash. No reply. I poured myself a cup of cider, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and turned on the porch lights. Jared was due over in half an hour with takeout and one of his terrible Hallmark movie picks. I looked forward to mocking the dialogue and letting the silence between us say more than any script could. Before he arrived, I went to the bookshelf in the hallway. Between two cookbooks, I slid Grandma's letter, still folded. Let them think they left a scar. What they left behind was a woman who didn't need them anymore. They thought family was about obedience. I learned it's about respect. And if you have to earn it with silence, it's not respect. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a clean floor, an unopened email, and knowing the locks have finally been changed. Sometimes the loudest betrayal is the kind that hides behind politeness, behind the word family. Lorelai's story reminds us that silence isn't peace, it's a slow erasure. And standing up for yourself, even if it means standing alone, can be the most powerful form of healing. What about you? Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own home? Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that uncover the truth behind closed doors.